Hello, I'm Harvey Ambrose, and I'm preaching this message today on behalf of the Missionary Baptist Voice of Africa radio station located in Monrovia, Liberia. And I greet those in that nation who listen to the broadcast and ask that as you have time and opportunity that you pray for me as I try to also pray for you. We're continuing in our studies of the book of Genesis, and we are in chapter 23. However, before beginning that discussion, I'd like to read a passage from the book of Acts that has a bearing on the passage in Genesis. So in Acts chapter 7, we have an account of the deacon, Stephen, who answers to the high priest, asking him, asking about what he's doing, preaching about Jesus. And so in Acts chapter 7, verse 2, Stephen responds. And he said, "Men, brethren, and fathers, hearken. The God of glory appeared unto our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Haran. And he said unto him, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and come into the land which I shall show thee. Then came he out of the land of the Chaldeans, and dwelt in Haran. And from thence, when his father was dead, he removed him into this land wherein ye now dwell. And he gave him none inheritance in it, no, not so much as to set his foot on. Yet he promised that he would give it to him for a possession, and to his seed after him, when as yet he had no child. And God spake on this wise, that his seed should sojourn in a strange land, and that they should bring them into bondage, and entreat them evil 400 years. And the nation to whom they shall be in bondage will I judge, said God. And after that they shall come forth and serve me in this place." And I'll end the reading there, and then turn to our principal text, Genesis chapter 23 and verse 1. And Sarah was 107 and 20 years old. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, the same as Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah, and to weep for her. And Abraham stood up from before his dead, and spake unto the sons of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. And I'll end the reading there, though, hopefully talk about it a little bit further on. I don't know if this will be much of a sermon or just a lesson, perhaps. But I think there's things that we should note here. As the deacon Stephen said, even though God had promised Abraham a son who was 100 years old before he got it, he had promised him all the land of Israel as a possession to him and his seed. And yet Abraham got none of it, other than that which he purchased, as we're about to read, from the children of Heth, later to be called the Hittites. He purchased a grave. And we can read in the letter to the Hebrews about us, not just Abraham, but all people of faith, in a very real sense, are like Abraham. I mean, Abraham was not a wonderful person. He worshiped idols with his family. And yet God saved him and gave him a different nature, a different character than what he had by nature. He then instructed him to separate himself from his family. He took with him others, but they dropped along on the wayside. Others were added in the way of servants. But he had his wife, and she had been with him now, for a long time. And she was 127 years old, and he lost her. Death took her. God took her. So, in a sense, it sounds sad that the people of God don't, in this life, in this world, don't have any real settled place. Now, they may live in the same home that they've always lived in. They may have inherited a home from their parents and stayed there. Who knows? I mean, there are some who don't move around all that much. There are many that do, particularly those who are called to preach, and the Lord sends them wherever He would have them go. But it doesn't really seem to matter one way or the other, because wherever they are in this world, they don't really make a real home out of this world. They are strangers to this world and its ways. It's not like the people of God are unaware of the ways of the world. They were in the world. They were of the world. They were just like everybody else in the world. But then something happened to them, something profound. God came on the scene, came into their lives through the Spirit, dwells in their hearts, and changes them, converts them from one type of person, the same type as everyone else that comes into the world naturally, into actual children of God, born again of His Spirit. In other words, born from above, born of God. And though they're living in this world, they have their eyes set on a better world. We never hear that even though Abraham wasn't given any possession in the land that had been given him by God, he had no title to it. He had a good title in the sense that there was a promise that his descendants would have it, but they had to take it by conquest, even though the Lord greatly aided it and facilitated their taking of it. But in Abraham's case, he had no title to any of the land, not in human terms, not according to this world. It belonged to the descendants of Ham through his eldest son, Canaan, or one of his sons, maybe not his eldest. And it was the land of the Canaanites, and of whom now Abraham approaches with a petition, not to be given something, but that something could be sold to him, a place to bury his wife. I think he was content with the life that God had given him. There's no complaints about it. He doesn't say, I'm tired of wandering around and living in tents with these servants and now this son that I have finally had. He was happy enough with it, because in that sense he was, by his very occupation, as one who owns and tends huge flocks of animals and herds of cattle and moves them about so that they have grazing so that they can eat and live. He is naturally separated from the world. In other words, he's not living in their cities. He's not engaging in their activities. He's not sad for that. He doesn't seek for that. If he wanted that, we read in the Bible, he had opportunity to go back to Ur of the Chaldees. He could have gone and lived in Ur, in a big town where you can find everything you want. It's right there at your fingertips. But he did not want to go back. He was looking for something better, a better place than you can have in this world. A heavenly place, we read. He was looking for a city, but not a city built by man, a city built by God himself. In a world yet to be made by God, wherein dwells righteousness and no sin. Something about the conversion of a person from the state of nature into which they're born, like everyone else, into a state of yet living in a natural body that is just like everyone else's. It's got its sinful inclinations. It's got its weakness. It gets its colds. It gets its diseases. It endures its catastrophes like everyone else. And yet it never again has the same pleasure from the pursuits of this world that it did prior to its conversion. Somehow, even though the world has some allurement to those who physically live here and yet have been saved by God, it has some allure, but there is something revealed in the hearts of the people of God such that we know of a better place. And our mind and our hearts, our emotions, often dwell upon a place. And the world thinks it's just wishful thinking or fantasy or whatever. And I can see why they think that way. I can remember when I was an atheist and unconverted, I thought the same way. Well, it's just silly. There's no proof of it. Why waste a life? Dream about something that isn't. But when you've been saved, God has revealed himself to you in your heart in such a way that you know it certain sure. It's like they say, well, you believe in God, but there's no proof of his existence. There is. God has proven himself to you. He has appeared to you. Remember, Stephen said, God appeared unto our father Abraham while he was in Mesopotamia. Before he ever left Ur of the Chaldees, God came to him. Abraham knew there was a God right then. He knew who that God was. May not have known his name, but he knew who he was because he met him. He had communication with God, and God makes it sure that you understand who it is that saved you and changed you. So the people of God, living wherever they live in this world, are never totally satisfied with this world by reason of that which excels it. Nevertheless, we love the people we love. We love more people than lost people do. God has put within us a love of the lost, a love of the enemies of God, because we remember being enemies of God. We know what it's like to live, to live in a world of hopelessness and not have God in our hearts to rest upon and lean upon in times of trouble, like Abraham now finds himself in. His beloved Sarah, his wife, for we have no idea when he married, but for a long time, a beautiful woman, so much so that it put his life at risk to have her around other men. He had lost her, just seemingly that easy. She was 127. Abraham would have been 137. And because he's 10 years older. And he lived to be, I believe, 175. So he lives another 38 years, having lost his wife. He marries again eventually, but that's for a later chapter. So what I tried to do when we began this discussion of why are we studying about Abraham is to root it to a passage in the Psalm that says, ye who seek after, or ye who follow after righteousness, ye who seek the Lord, look into the rock from whence you are hewn, and into the pit of the hole from which you are digged. Look to Abraham, your father, and to Sarah, who bare you. So our, in a sense, spiritual father and mother. Now those who truly have found the righteousness of God, they've been born not of Abraham and Sarah, but of God. But yet, God brings him in as an example, as a so-called father to us, to whom we should look. So we're going to look at this. I thought I would preach the chapter, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. These are somber times. Abraham loves Sarah. She's all he had till he was 100 years old, and finally he gets Isaac. And it's been a nice 37 years having Isaac grow up in her home, a child that she should never have been able to bear. She's 90 years old when she has him. It's a miracle, and yet there he is, a good, strong, healthy, pleasant boy. His name means laughter. Well named. We read nothing unpleasant about Isaac at all. I don't know if I've read of any weakness in him. There may have been some, but we don't read it. His father, Abraham, becomes in our last chapter a type of the Father, of the Lord God Almighty in heaven, the Father, maker of heaven and earth. He becomes a picture of God, and that he was willing to sacrifice his son because God required it of him. What was spared that at the last second, just to prove him. But if he is a type of the Father, then we, the children of that promise, that through Abraham's seed all the nation of the world would be blessed, we are the happy recipients of that promise, then we are the laughter. We're the Isaac. That doesn't mean that we never do anything wrong. Isaac must have done some wrong things, but we don't read it. And just like we've done wrong things, God speaks about our sins that have been forgiven in Christ. He says, I'm going to separate those from you as far as the east is from the west. I'm going to put those behind my back. Well, know that God sees in all directions, and yet there's a behind his back, a place where they will never come to his mind. Where he said, I forgive them. I forget them. They are gone. I behold no sin in these people. We don't look at Isaac and see the sin, and that's a picture of us. If we're saved, we are the child of the promise. Their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. And every tear in their eye, I will wipe it away. I will overcome death for them. I'll overcome the grave. I'll bring their bodies up. I will reconstitute them and make them into a spiritual body fit to live with God where he is forever. Joy indeed to have such a son. And we believe that we are the sons of the Father who he will be made glad in that day when all things are set right by him. So she's dead. And it says Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. We learn by that those of us who are saved, we still have tragedies in our lives. Loved ones, close ones die. And it's right to mourn. It is right to weep. God's given us these things, that the mourning is it's a respect for the one that we loved. The weeping is almost a curative thing for us. Somehow in the weeping, we gain strength. I don't understand that. I remember going through it, though. I've been there. The weeping helped. Mourning and weeping are a little bit different, and particularly as regards the customs of that time. There was mourning, and we still have it here. Still, there's some semblances of it in this profane culture. Some of us still wear black when we go to funerals of anyone, out of respect, showing our mourning over the loss of someone who died. It's respectful. When I was a child, a funeral would pass. Every car would pull off to the side of the road. I've been in those processions. I would see old men get out of their cars, take off their hats, and hold them as the funeral procession passed them by. We used to do things different. We used to do things better. We had a regard for those who remained from a stranger that we did not know who had died, yet he had loved ones, and to show our respect, we stopped what we were doing, regardless of what hurry we were in. We got out of our cars, regardless of how hot it was outside, and we showed respect. If we went to the funeral, we dressed appropriately. They don't even call them funerals anymore. They call them celebrations of life. I don't know what's wrong with people. There's nothing to celebrate about death. And that's what had happened to Sarah. And it happened to Abraham too. Even though he lived on for a long time, her death was almost, I'm sure, a death stroke for him because of the great love wherewith he loved her. He had lost her. She was gone, and he was left in the world almost alone. Yet he had Isaac, and we see soon that he takes particular attention to make sure he takes care of Isaac. So it is right to weep. It is right to mourn. I said mourning's different. That's showing respect by your attire and your demeanor and your somberness, your ceasing of other activities so that you pay respect to some person that you loved, or maybe that you didn't even know, but because someone loved them, and because of the dignity of human life, which is no more regarded in this nation here than as if an ant died. It is so profane that I'm ashamed of it. Ashamed of the nation that it's become. Ashamed of a world where human life is so lightly esteemed. Weeping is personal. Weeping isn't just observing the decorum of somber reflection on the dead and honoring them, like mourning is. Weeping is tears and anguish, sorrow, a deep feeling of permanent loss, shock at the suddenness by which death so often comes. We don't know. Sarah's death was a long time coming. We don't know if she was sick a long time or if it just happened overnight and that was it. But we know that Abraham wept over her. To weep is a sign of that inside the person, the bereaved, is all those senses of loss. Nowadays, they'll drug up the relations of those who died. A doctor is more than happy to give you a shot so that you're almost numb to what's going on around you. You've lost someone. He don't want you to feel bad, so he gives you a shot. Something like Valium or some codeine thing or something to kind of take the edge off the grief. I think it's a bad idea. I think we should weep with them that weep and mourn with them that mourn, and also to be glad with them who rejoice. So it says he mourned for Sarah, he wept for her. Then there's a new paragraph starts. He says that Abraham stood up from before his death. He had been there with her. He'd been looking at her face, no doubt kissing her body. But bodies only last so long. They begin very quickly. I mean, immediately upon death, they don't look like themselves. Something's missing. What's missing is the person. The person themselves is gone. They've been separated from this carcass that lies dead. There's no life in them. The spirits of dead men go to the Lord, where one thing or another happens to them. They're either brought with joy into his presence, or they are cast into hell awaiting final judgment, where there's nothing but torment and flames. I'm persuaded Sarah was the former. She had entered into the joys of her Lord, but Abraham still stuck in a world in which he doesn't own a square inch of property, no place to bury Sarah. He could have sat there and pined away forever, and he will yet grieve for years, maybe the rest of his life, to some extent. But if you're still living, you got to put your dead away and get on with your life. It's a hard thing to believe when it's happened to you that you could ever get over it, but time and the blessings of God can soften the wound of losing a well-beloved. So he stood up from before his dead, and he got down to the business of dealing with her body. I mean, who else is going to do that? He's going to get a servant. Well, just go take care of the woman that I've loved for 80 years or however long they had been together. I mean, what's he supposed to do? Well, of course, he's going to take care of the issue. He does it. And he does it by he gets up from before his dead, and he speaks to the sons of Heth. Like I say, Heth was the progenitor, if you will, of the Hittite tribe, who eventually became a powerful nation that went way up into Turkey, way up towards the Baltic or the Black Sea. I'm not sure which of those, and I'm not that good on geography. You know, the Bible talks about him here being 4,000 years ago or a little more, and yet the archaeologists of the 1800s and 1900s said, well, there is no such thing as the Hittites. This is just a fantasy in the Bible. It's like the unicorn or God, whatever. That is until they found them. Archaeology is a friend to the Bible because when it's truly found, it always verifies what is said in this book. Hittites were real and they were powerful. They eventually discovered the Hittite Empire, which, of course, people have been reading about ever since Moses wrote this, some 3,500 years ago. God knew about the Hittites. Abraham lived amongst them when he was living in the plain of Mamre. So he goes to Heth. He speaks to the sons of Heth, to the Hittites, saying, and I want you to notice his demeanor, how he behaves and how they behave. And compare that. I don't know what hopefully your culture is way better than the American culture. We have sunk so far that this type of behavior just doesn't even exist anymore. Now, even though he lived amongst these people, he was nomadic. And he He was separated from them because they worshiped gods that didn't exist, and he worshiped the living God whom he knew. He would be kind to them. He'd never steal from them or take something he shouldn't, or presume upon them as though they owed him something. He was courteous to the extreme. Listen to his language. Abraham said to these people, I am a stranger and a sojourner with you, meaning in your land. Give me a possession for a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. So here's his request. This body's got to go to the ground. I can't leave her out. You know, the elements, this is going to become something that was lovely to me into something that mine eyes cannot look upon. You can't dwell with the dead. They go to one place, while the living still walk above the earth for a while. I've got to bury her out of my sight. I can't look at her anymore. He's going to put her behind him. That's what we all have to do. When death comes, it's so horrible because not only have you lost something precious, but you've got a few days in which you've got to make provisions so that this loved one is put under the ground or dealt with in some other way, which to me would be less satisfactory than the tried and true burial. But you got to deal with it. The one who is most connected to the dead is the one that deals with it, that makes the decisions, sometimes engages in the actual process of procuring a coffin or a gravesite or whatever. And that's all he's doing right here to people that he's not related to, that he's not connected to. He's just living and wandering nomadically with his animals and herds through their region. He said, I'm just a stranger. I'm a sojourner, a traveler. I need a possession of a burying place. I need to own it. So the children of Heth answered Abraham and said to him, now here is courtesy. They could say, you have no place here. This is our land. You've been grazing your animals here and drinking water out of our rivers and streams and wells, and now you want more? They didn't say that. They weren't family. They weren't closely connected to Abraham, but there was something about Abraham that they appreciated because their words were, I don't think they were just fanciful or falsely complimentary. I think they meant what they said. I think the sons of Heth at this time were honorable men. Regardless of their religion, they were honorable. He says, the children of Heth answered Abraham, saying unto him, hear us, my Lord. See, that's a title of respect. Thou art a mighty prince among us. And the language in which this is written is like a prince of God. A prince of the Most High is what the language means. But a mighty prince among us, meaning you're dwelling among us, and we consider you to be a prince of God. In other words, they were honored to have him. I wonder if you do that. I wonder if the neighborliness of Abraham towards those around him and the good things he did, I wonder if he even noted that they would make an impression upon those living near him. You're a mighty prince among us. It's not what you think, Abraham. You may consider yourself a stranger and a sojourner, but we're honored to have you living among us. And we don't consider you strange in any way. Not only so, but we don't want you to feel worried about this. We want to help you with your problems now. And you just pick out the best place you can find to bury your wife. That's what he's saying. In the choice of our sepulchres, our graves, bury thy dead. None of us shall withhold from thee his sepulchre, but that thou mayest bury thy dead. There's not anyone here that will not give you the best of the grave sites that are available in all the land that we control. You just pick it, Abraham, because you're a prince of God. And I don't know what else to say it. They genuinely were honored that Abraham lived amongst them. And so should the people of God be. They should be a blessing to their neighborhood. Over here, and I'm part of the culture, I hardly ever step outside my house. It's pretty hot here in Kentucky now where I've moved, and it's hot for an Alaskan to be down here, and so I don't get out much. I try to be nice when I do engage my neighbors, but I seldom do. We have air conditioners in our house and televisions and all means of distracting us from one another so that we don't know each other. But it has not always been that way. It should not yet be that way. We have lost neighborliness in America. We don't get around each other much. When we do get around at some activity, it's a staged thing. Some athletic game, or some rock concert, or to a movie house, or to a bar, or to some place that is calculated to bring carnal pleasure, and we gather to that rather than sitting outside on the front porch and seeing our neighbors on theirs and going over and say hello and bring them a little gift of food or something. That used to happen in my lifetime, particularly amongst country people, but even in the cities. So much has changed in such a short time. It existed back here, though, back in those days, between people who thought themselves a stranger to them, said so. They said, yeah, you may be a stranger, but we love you, Abraham. We're glad to have you. And if the people of God, unlike myself, if we would get out and be neighborly, go out of the way to befriend those who live around us, it would work for their good. Because God blessed us, and He'll bless those around us. We ought to be a blessing to the people of this world. We have so much in store for us in the world to come that the small things of this world mean little to us, just like they meant really nothing to Abraham. He was satisfied not to own anything until he needed a grave. We have everything. We should share. Freely we received. We should freely give. Of ourselves. And what wisdom we've gained from the Lord in terms of things eternal, things that matter, the important things that a lost and dying world needs to know about. I think Abraham must have somehow blessed those people without his even knowing he had done it. Now he had bowed himself. It says Abraham stood up and he bowed himself to the people of the land, even to the children of Heth, and he communed with them. So he's visiting now. He's made his request. They've given an answer. You can have anything you want. Now, out of recognition of their very fine offer, he bows himself to the ground. Abraham's 137 years old, and he bows himself right to the ground. And he becomes more specific. He fellowships, he communes with them. And he's starting to say, because they've already said you could have it. And so he's starting to get more specific. He says, if it be your mind that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me to Ephron, the son of Zohar. See, Abraham had already seen a cave that he wanted to buy, a piece of land, a field that went with the cave. He said that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he hath, which is at the end of his field, for as much money as it's worth. I want to pay for it, but I do want it. And he shall give it me for a possession of a burying place amongst you. I want a field. It's got a cave at the back. I'll put Sarah in that cave, and later himself, and Isaac, and Isaac's wife, and Jacob, and Jacob's wife. They're still there. That cave is still there. It's in Hebron. Hebron is in the land of Israel, formerly Palestine. It's still a Palestinian town. But I mean, it's got a big structure built around it all. But Abraham's there. Sarah is there. Isaac is there. Rebekah's there. Jacob's there. And Leah. Those 6 people are in a cave that now it's a place that people fight over the bodies of the dead that I hope are still resting comfortably despite the gun attacks and the mortar attacks and everything that people do that are superstitious and believe that actual place is important. It's unbelievable. All the fighting that's taken place. You can go there now. If you don't get shot or something, you can go to Machpelah. I don't think you can go down and see the bodies, but you can go to where the cave is. It's still there. You can look it up on the internet. Anyway, they built an edifice there. I'm running out of time. But he said, I want to buy it. That's the place I want. And so Ephron, the one who owned it, and Ephron dwelt among the children of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite. See, now they're showing that the descendants of Heth are the Hittites, answered Abraham in the audience of the children of Heth, so in front of everybody, even of all that went at the gate of his city. So all the people of the town came out and heard what he said to Abraham. He says, no, nay, my Lord, hear me. The field I give thee, the cave that is therein, I give it thee. In the presence of the son of my people, give I it to thee to bury thy dead. No, Abraham, you take it. I want you to have it. Everybody's bearing witness. It's yours. You know, it's nice when people are so nice to us like that. But Abraham was rich. Probably richer than Ephron. He was well able to afford it. He would rather it cost him something than accept this extremely generous. See the courtesy of these people. That's what I'm trying to get across. If we consider ourselves superior to those ancient primitives, we don't know what we're talking about. Our forefathers were better than us. They were greater than us. They were wiser and more intelligent than we are. We are devolving, not evolving as the liars would have it. We're not getting better. We're getting worse. I love reading these things. It tells us how even a wicked world used to be better. We're losing this fight. Humanity is. We're going the way of all sinners. Nay, I don't want your money. Have it. Abraham won't take it, though. Not on that terms. He wants to pay. He wants to give something for Sarah. He bows himself down before the people of the land. So he bows himself again. He's 137 years old. He speaks to Ephron and the audience of the people of the land. And he says, but if thou wilt give it to me, I pray thee here, I will give thee money for the field. Take it of me. I will bury my dead there. Please take the payment. I appreciate the offer, but I've got money to pay for it. Sell it to me, Ephron. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying, my Lord, hearken unto me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. But what's that betwixt me and thee? Bury therefore thy dead. If you want to buy it, it's worth 400 shekels. Give it to me. It's yours. Or just take it. Money is not a thing that should be entering into this conversation, is what Ephron's saying. It means nothing to me. It means nothing to you. If it's more important to you to pay, then pay. Otherwise, take the gift. but bury your dead. What a wonderful thing. 400 shekels, I've been trying to figure it out. It's a weight of silver, and it's about $3,200 in American money today. Not much money for a field and a cave. I wish it was that cheap now, but it's not. It's gone out of sight. But there's a lot more people struggling for the same amount of property than there was. And it says, in the field of Ephron, which is in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, in the field, and the cave which was therein, and all the trees that were in the field, that were in the borders round about, were made sure unto Abraham for a possession in the presence of the children of Heth, before all that went in and out of the gate of the city. So in other words, now it's known to all people that it's Abraham's. He bought it. He's got right and title to it. It's his. He finally owns land in the land that God sent him to, and God has given it to him in promise, but in fact, at least now he owns a place that he uses for him and his family as a funeral sepulcher. And they're there to this day. It says, after this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, the same as Hebron, in the land of Canaan. About 20 miles south of Jerusalem. It's right at the edge of the mountains that separate the plains of Mamre from the Dead Sea. It was made sure unto Abraham for a possession of a burying place by the sons of Heth, by the Hittites. Went a little bit over. God bless you. I hope that's been of some value to you. Goodbye.